As I'm navigating my way out of Colac, where I've just registered the Mitsubishi, found that for a long drive, even if it's in a car that you're not perhaps the happiest owning or the happiest driving, if you like cars, a long drive, as long as you're not too uncomfortable, actually is quite therapeutic, I've found. Having driven this thing for the last 2 and a bit hours here and then driving it back to Melbourne, I found that a nice long drive is always a good thing in terms of relaxation and also keeping your sanity at times. And it also is very good on the car. The Outlander feels like it's loosened up a lot. Its transmission doesn't clunk as much. It feels like the engine is becoming more powerful as I'm driving it after I've serviced it and cleaned it up. It's really, really good on the car. Long drive like this with the Outlander has actually helped it quite a lot. It's given the engine a lot more refinement. The cruise control's working again. The engine feels like it's loosening up. It feels like it's doing what it wants to do, which it hasn't done in such a long time, because after having bought this car and had it working on it for the last 5 odd months, I haven't really got to drive it that much. I've got to drive it a bit, driving from Dromana back to Melbourne, but not so much that it had a lot of Ks on it from when I bought it. And gauging by when registration was cancelled and what state the car was in and when I last think it was driven, I think it's had a drive like this for at least a couple of years. So it's really helping the car out a lot. The car does feel a lot better, which is a good thing. And it is definitely showing up that while the Outlander dynamically is not very good in terms of handling, its suspension is relatively compliant, although as we're coming up on a bend here on a bit of an off-camber surface coming to a roundabout, you can feel that this thing does not want to turn. Really having to give it, there's a lot of body roll, there's lots and lots of lean. It's not dynamically a car that is for corners, but as we get to 100 kilometers an hour now, and this engine is revving quite loudly, 4,000 RPM in third gear, down to fourth, up to fourth, and now at 2,500 RPM. This is where we see this car really start to come into its own. The Outlander is not the best car in the world if you are in the city driving around corners in tight areas, or it's not the sort of car you take on a nice windy road. But on a long journey, sitting on a highway, even if the seat's not the most comfortable in the world, it actually is a very good car for this sort of job, because the engine pulls well at 100 kilometers an hour. Okay, this one does have some squeaks here and there, which, again, being an early model Outlander, not being built the best, you kind of expect it. But on a journey like this, sitting at 100 k's an hour, it does seem to go very, very well. The engine feels good. It still feels like it has plenty of torque even with the 4-speed box. It's not bad for something like this. It feels almost like this car is a modern day Mitsubishi Sigma station wagon. That's the sort of vibe I'm getting now that I've driven it on a long journey. I'm starting to think, well, it's not really, it's smaller than a Lancer wagon, but in terms of the way it drives, the way it's set up similar to an old Magna or old Sigma in the way it's calibrated. And that's probably a good reason why you see these things out in country Victoria a lot, and also in regional areas in South Australia, is because these cars are set up for this kind of mileage. Now, Mitsubishi did have a proving ground here until 2008 at Tailem Bend, which is now the Bend Motorsport Park. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if this thing was tested at some point, a prototype Outlander was tested at Tailem Bend. So that's something that I found that with this car, it's set up quite well for drives like this. So yes, this is not a car that I originally thought much of, but as I've come to drive it, I now do see a purpose for this car. I can definitely see there is something to this car for someone who wants a car that's a long distance cruiser. It does make good sense as a long distance cruiser. It's quite a relaxed car to be in terms of the driving position, although I really wish it had telescopic control. It has the turntable, tilt table, up and down, but no backwards and forwards, and steering column. But if you're someone who would fit this car properly and you wanted a long journey car, this is actually a car you'd be thinking of if you want to put 5 people in it.